Thank you very much for joining us. This is Deschutes County Board of Commissioners meeting for 9 a.m. Wednesday, June 7th, 2023. First item on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me.
Allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So as I say, I do have some requests to speak here, and I'll call up James Cook, referring to a Juniper Ridge discussion that we're having right now.
If the light's green, it is on. James Cook, I live in Redmond. And I want to talk a little bit today about Juniper Ridge, which you'll be considering in 2 weeks, and accountability around homelessness. I often hear that we're investing millions of dollars, which is true, to address homelessness, and people want to know what those results and be able to see them are. And I think that's a fair thing to ask. And I've just had a discussion earlier this week about a public dashboard that would be able to show some of those results, would be able to tell us where our investments are working, where they're not working, where we need to innovate, and where we need to invest more. So I'm looking forward to that. But I also want to talk about the responsibility of our elected officials, and specifically around Juniper Ridge. 5 years ago, when some of us were running for commissioner, some more successful than others, the topic of homelessness, I think, came up in one event that we were at. It wasn't even on the radar. Soon after that, I became co-chair of the Homeless Leadership Coalition. And one of the first issues I faced was Juniper Ridge. The city of Bend wanted to clear Juniper Ridge so they could install a sewer line. In spite of the efforts of service providers to work with the city went ahead and moved forward, clearing that area without a plan for the people who were living there, without shelter space, and without a safe and legal place identified for those people to move to. We all know what's happened since then. We've had Huddle Road, ODOT right-of-ways, Emerson Avenue, 2nd Street, and others, sweep after sweep after sweep. There's no public accountability for how much money we're spending moving this problem from one place to another. There's still no plan in place for how our cities and counties are going to work to actually solve the problem of homelessness, again, as opposed to just moving it to other places. Here we are 5 years later, and we're back at the same location, Juniper Ridge, trying to find out what we're going to do with that area. What I ask the commissioners when you consider this in 2 weeks is not to continue to make this, do the same thing over and over again and expect somehow different results. That's not going to happen. If you move forward without a plan for where these people can go, without adequate shelter space, without a safe and legal area, we're going to have the same result again. It'll just be new encampments in new places, in new neighborhoods. And these people are not going away. They're people who live in Central Oregon. I just ask that you keep that in mind, and keep in mind your responsibility to all the people of Deschutes County when you make decisions in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, James.
So is there any other requests to speak on items not on the agenda today? Is there anybody online? Okay, thank you very much. So at this time, consent agenda. We have some thank yous for Audit Committee and Investment Advisory Committee and minutes.
So move approval of the consent.
Second. Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And chair votes yes. At this time, taking a moment for staff recognition. Kathy Christensen, see all these people that came to join us. Is Kathy in the room? In the back, it looks like. Okay. We have a Audio on. Sounds like it. There we go. Okay. So thank you very much for joining us. Looks like we have some folks to share information with us. So if there's any words to be said, please join us at the microphone, and then we will take a photo also. So, yep, right there. Thank you. Dr. Baggio, great to see you.
See you. So for the record, Rita Baggio, and I'm here with Kathy Christensen, who is going to be presented with this plaque. Kathy is one of our most dedicated staff. What I love most about her is her compassion for the clients that we serve. We serve vulnerable populations, and she's all out there going above and beyond, trying to help them in whatever way. Even if it means ordering an AC for them, she would do it. She's very compassionate, and her heart is sold out to the work that we do here. We are very lucky to have her in our department.
Great, thank you. Any words?
I didn't know there's
Yeah.
such a crowd. So yeah, I was thinking back on my 25 years as working as a public health nurse for Deschutes County. And, I've gotten a huge array of experiences from, doing classrooms on all kinds of prevention topics throughout the community, to serving lots and lots of clients in our public health clinic, to I was a supervisor and mentor for 17 AmeriCorps members over the years who have gone on to be lawyers and doctors and public health employees. And so I've just had an array of many incredible experiences. And I think I feel really blessed to have had all those experiences. It's given me a different perspective on, what people are dealing with in the community. And I feel really blessed to have had that experience. So thank you all.
Well, thank you very much for your 25 years of service to the people of Deschutes County in public health and all the different services you have provided. Any other thoughts real quick? Yeah, no, there we go. Yeah. So we're going to come down to get a photo. Any other thoughts real quick?
Oh, no, Kathy, I just wanted to thank you for serving during the couple of years of COVID. It was incredibly challenging for our health department, for the world, and appreciate you staying through and being, and still having a smile on your face regarding your service and how much it means to you personally and how much it means to people in our community. So thank you.
I was just trying to imagine how many thousands of lives of Deschutes County residents you've affected in those 25 years. And you may have a better guess than I, but I'm sure it's a really impressive number. And thank you for your service to our community.
Great. Photo time. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the original one is by the.
Ready, 3, 2, 1. Thank you.
Item number 7, informational update from Arnold Irrigation District and its infrastructure modernization project. So Steve Johnson's coming to join us here today. So thank you very much. We have some maps provided to us. Oh, you're good. Yeah. So we'll have them on the presentation also. So just a point of acknowledgement, we did have a lot of public testimony on this subject, and this is a follow on to that. So this is the best information we have from the district directly. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Commissioners Adair, Chang, and DeVone. Thank you for agreeing to give Arnold Irrigation District time on the agenda to put before you the facts with regard to Arnold's main canal piping project. I'm Bob Schur. president of the Arnold Board. I'm also an Arnold patron and a farmer and rancher. My family, my wife and I, our daughter and son-in-law, run a family farm business that produces beef and lamb, which is sold primarily here in Deschutes County to some 500 families, restaurants, markets each month. Irrigation water is the lifeblood of our business. Water grows grass that our animals eat in spring and summer, and the hay that feeds them in the winter. When water is cut off early, as it has been for Arnold patrons the last 3 and now possibly 4 years, we can't grow enough grass or hay to feed our animals. To compensate for the lack of a secure water supply by which we can grow our own grass and hay, we lease additional grazing land, and we have to buy hay from others that have the water to grow it. The additional costs of leases and additional hay have a real impact on the long-term viability of our business. So if our farm business faces these challenges, there's many others here in Deschutes County and Central Oregon that are facing the same challenges. In short, failure to provide long-term water security potentially threatens many of the farmers here. And if farm businesses fail, then the many other businesses that depend on us as farmers, as you know, clients and customers, have a similar problem, and the 500 families and other businesses that are buying food from us have a food security problem as well. So water security is a significant economic issue for all of Deschutes County. Fortunately for Arnold patrons, we have a viable, approved solution to the water security problem: Arnold's Main Canal Piping Project. Had Arnold's Main Canal Project been completed prior to the drought, the water saved and the efficiencies gained by the project would have provided Arnold patrons, myself included, water for very close to a full irrigation season, even in the last 3 years where we've had to cut off early. Nearly a full irrigation season, even in the worst drought on record, equals water security and economic viability for farmers. Not only does the Main Canal Project help provide water security for Arnold patrons, the Main Canal Project also provides multiple environmental and economic benefits for the entire Deschutes Basin community. The project has the further virtue of being fully approved at the state and federal level, with the vast majority of its funding in place. In summary, Arnold's Main Canal Project is something that we can and are doing today to address the significant water security issues that confront both Deschutes County and Central Oregon in general. The Arnold Irrigation Board has spent many hours considering the issues related to this project, all sides of the issues, and the board has voted unanimously to proceed with construction. Steve Johnson and Kate Fitzpatrick, Steve's general manager of Arnold, and Kate is the executive director of the Deschutes River Conservancy, have a brief presentation which will give you more of the facts about the project. And my fellow board member, Rob Rastovich, will close with some final thoughts based on both his experience and the Rastovich's family's 100 years of experience farming and ranching here in Bend. So thank you again for the time this morning.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks for coming.
Our pleasure.
So I'm Steve Johnson, District Manager for Arnold Irrigation District. Previously, over 10 years at Central Oregon Irrigation District as District Manager. Thanks again for the opportunity to come in and just lay out some facts and figures.
Go ahead and bring the mic just a little closer
Sure.
to you, just to make sure. It picks up well, but just directional. There you go.
Yep, no problem. So you do have the presentation in front of you, and we'll welcome questions at any time. Okay. Sorry, trying to figure out.
Down, left, or right probably is going to make it
Yeah,
move.
trying that.
Technology. There you go.
There we go. Now we got to go back. Okay, we keep going ahead. Sorry. It's not letting me, you have the presentation in front of you.
Yep, and they may be able to help you in the back.
Okay.
Brenda's coming.
It might be a battery. Check it.
Okay.
Can you move the slides from back there, back to the first one? Yeah, so go ahead and go back to the first one, or maybe the second one you were.
Yeah,
looking
the
to
second
get to.
one. Go
So
back.
Modernization
There we go.
project benefits, next one. There we go.
Right. This is a infographic we put together when the watershed plan was approved back in last summer in August. And it just summarizes benefits, impacts, et cetera, for the project. On a large scale, you have 11.9 miles of main canal that will be built in 4 phases, 3 winters, hopefully in a row, starting this winter. And it'll conserve 32.5 CFS for a project cost of 34 million. That is in line with every other piping project that's been done in Central Oregon by all of the irrigation districts, Three Sisters, COI, Lone Pine, Swally, Tumalo, and now Arnold. The 32.5 CFS is significant if you think about it in gallons per day. That exceeds 20 million gallons a day equivalent. And that 3.4 billion gallons collectively equals nearly 70% of the city of Bend's entire annual water supply. So this is a significant amount of water that is seeping through the 120-year-old ditch that runs, like other irrigation districts. And we lose system-wide, we lose close to 50%. So that means you have to take twice as much out of the river in order to compensate for the losses on the way to the head gates. Okay. So if you increase the efficiency and eliminate the seepage, then you're able to deliver to the head gate much more efficiently, less water consumed by Arnold in this situation. That will pass to North Unit Irrigation District in the summertime and is permanently protected in stream during the wintertime for the habitat and the environment, which leads me to why the winter habitat and early spring habitat is important. I mentioned, go forward slide. That just shows the Arnold Irrigation District area. That purple or fuchsia line along the south is the extent of the project. As I mentioned earlier, 11.9 miles. This project is being constructed in the context of a broader effort with all the irrigation districts of the Deschutes Basin Board of Control. Over 12 years ago, we became aware that we had some Endangered Species Act species of concern that were going to be moving to threatened. And so in that effort, the irrigation districts, because it take water out of the river, have responsibility for that impact on these species. And under the Endangered Species Act, we have to offset or mitigate the effects of taking water out of the river. And so the primary focus has been on piping because that yields the highest quantity of waters in the shortest period of time. It is not the only method. There are market-based transactions that have been done in the past and will be happening again going forward. But the magnitude of these projects are in excess of $215 million. That's all money that's coming into Central Oregon, primarily into Deschutes County, with all the corresponding jobs and that economic impact. So not quite $250 million is already lined up, if you will, a large percentage of that, primarily through the U.S. Department of Agriculture and their Division of the Natural Resources Conservation Service. It's an established federal program. It's been in existence for many years. And the irrigation districts of Central Oregon quickly identified that as an opportunity, along with our elected federal representatives and senators, to utilize that program to help us mitigate our effects to address the Endangered Species Act. And we have a 30-year agreement with the federal government that provides us protection from the enforcement provisions of the ESA, as long as we do what we said we're going to do in that agreement. And what we said we were going to do in that agreement is put more water in the stream.
So a little bit of clarity, you mentioned Deschutes Basin Border Control. So that's all the districts working together.
Correct.
And the Habitat Conservation Plan is applied at that level, all the districts working together?
That's correct. They're all signatories plus the city of Prineville. All of us had exposure, for lack of a better word, liability for probably a more precise word, with our impacts on threatened species. It's not just Oregon spotted frog, but it's also the mid-Columbia steelhead and bull trout further down the Deschutes. But we take water out at the top, you have less water at the bottom, right? And the corresponding temperature effects, et cetera, from that. So I just wanted to give you a broader context into, it's not just Arnold on its own, doing its own thing. It's part of a collective effort that's related to a 30-year agreement with the federal government. There are some, the next couple of slides, it just summarizes some of the effects and that I've mentioned. The $35 million project cost for Arnold, to be specific about that, 75% of that has already been assured by NRCS, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We've already received matching for phase 1 of our 4 phases from OWEB and from Oregon Water Resource Department. We'll be able to continue to utilize or apply for funds for our matching. So 75% comes from the federal government, 25% has to come from our own funds or non-federal funds. And so far, we've been successful on the state side. But Arnold has also its own skin in the game and our own funds with these projects. I'll pass this to Kate to explain a little more on the conservation side and the benefits.
Great. Good morning, commissioners. Thanks for having us. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Kate Fitzpatrick, Executive Director of the Deschutes River Conservancy. The DRC's mission is to restore stream flow and water quality in the Deschutes Basin. And we've been working collaboratively with partners for the last 26 years to do that. So in addition to the districts being very invested in this project, the conservation interests are very invested as well. We have been collaborating and implementing and planning for decades, and modernizing irrigation conveyance systems, i.e. piping canals, is a central and integral component to how we're going to solve basin water security issues, both for agriculture and for rivers. So the Arnold project, for example, does 3 things at least. It helps secure water reliability for Arnold patrons. It helps provide critical water supply for Jefferson County farmers that are struggling, and it increases flows in the upper Deschutes River, and not at an insignificant level. The project that Steve is describing is actually going to increase flows in the upper Deschutes by 30% in a time when we're trying to meet flows for endangered species. So these projects really are critical to the basin's goals. And I just want to underline that, you know, supporting agriculture, supporting the river and all the recreation and amenities that the river provides, that's really the backbone of Deschutes County's economy. So projects like Arnold have been through extensive public vetting, have full support of the conservation community, recognize there's trade-offs to anything that we do, but the benefits of this project have proven to really to shine. And so we need people supporting canal piping in Central Oregon. Happy to answer any questions.
Brenda, if we could advance a few slides. Keep going. Another one. Another one. Another one. Okay, here we go. So since I become manager, not quite 2 years ago with Arnold, questions about the project, a lot of the questions are related to the process. So how did Arnold evolve into having this project? How did it get its funding, et cetera? And it started back in 2018, 2017. So 5-6 years ago, the process started where Arnold and the irrigation districts of the Deschutes Basin Border Control began working with NRCS and what's called the PL 566 program for funding for water conservation. And if we go to the next slide, the process has been very deliberate and it's very elaborate and has involved multiple public meetings and multiple opportunities for public comment. I'm not going to go through each of these items. They're there for your reference. The public was provided an extended public comment period 2 years ago when the draft watershed plan was issued. And then last year in August, not quite a year ago, on August 6th, the final watershed plan, which digested all of the comments from the public, and the NRCS made the determination, the federal government made the determination under federal law on the process of NEPA that there was a finding of no significant impact. Okay. And so finding of no significant impact and final authorization for the project, which happened on December 9th. And we'll be beginning construction on phase 1, which will be not quite 3.5 miles this fall. And we expect to have all 4 phases completed by 3 winters from now. One of the aspects, forward a slide, please. One more. This is the scope of what the NEPA has to address, what an environmental assessment has to address. And you can see all of the different categories. And this was all done in a several 100-page document that's public record, posted on our website, posted on a number of other websites for anyone to look at and to see how the NRCS digested the comments from the public and how they evaluated them and how they answered them. So very involved. It took several years and it was very much a public process. Okay. There were multiple mailings that the district had to do to all of its patrons. And so particularly now, as we move forward to construction, I've met with every landowner on phase 1, one-on-one, except for 3 out of 44. Invited, asked, but that they had declined for whatever reason. So I just wanted to reemphasize this process, how long it's been and how involved it's been and the number of partners and players and time that it's taken to get through this. Another big question is, well, what alternatives were evaluated beside just the piping? So this is all documented. It's in the final watershed plan. And there were 9 alternatives that were evaluated. There were 3 that had additional evaluation from the preliminary investigative report, NRCS calls it, to the draft watershed plan, and then to the final watershed plan. And there were 3. So one of them is no action, meaning don't do anything. What happens? Okay. What are the impacts for that? Canal lining, and I'll explain this in a little more detail, as well as piping. Okay. So then the process requires that further evaluation of those 3 alternatives was undertaken. And it's all in the final watershed plan for anybody to read. There's an economic and qualitative assessment determination by NRCS. So if we go to the next slide. So lining can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Canal lining in its most efficient and long duration time frame involves what they call a geomembrane, a reshaping of the canal. There's a impermeable like lining, like mat, like like a big yoga mat, if you will, that goes down along the bottom. And then you put 4 to 6 inches of what they call shotcrete. It's a lighter concrete mix that you spray on to create a lining. It's similar to if you drive north and go out by Pronghorn and head out by Redmond Airport, you'll see the North Unit Irrigation District has a lined canal. It was slightly different than what I described. They did not use a geomembrane, but just for illustrative purposes that could give someone a context. So there's a national economic efficiency analysis that is required to be done on these alternatives. And I'm showing you the results on this slide here on how did canal lining compare to piping. And the piping is expected to last over 100 years. Okay. So in a 100-year project lifetime, 100 years plus actually, with what's called high density polyethylene pipe. And that's how all of the piping's done, plus steel in certain occasions through all the Central Oregon Irrigation District projects. The initial cost for piping is less than the canal lining. And over the course of 100 years, the canal lining will have to be replaced at least 2 to 3 times. So piping is more or less a one and done economically. And we have that funding from the federal government. We're going to put that in the ground. We're going to find our match, and it'll last several generations. On the lining side, because of the replacement every 30 years, 25 to 30 years, you're tripling the overall cost. And there's no assurance to Arnold Irrigation District who's going to fund that replacement 30 years from now. So, and initially it's more expensive. There are other pros and cons with lining versus the piping, but you still have public safety issues. In fact, they are exacerbated because the water increases in speed. It flows faster. There's really no way for an animal or a person, if they fall in, to get out. That makes it much more difficult. And this is all documented. It's discussed in the watershed plan. And to be honest, it's common knowledge with people that manage water throughout the US West. I'll accelerate here a little bit.
Well, so I was gonna say another big picture item, Deschutes River Conservancy, 20, how many years? 25, 20?
26 years.
26 years. So 26 years ago, groups of people came together and said, oh, we're going to have to manage this a lot more aggressively, basically trying to stay away from environmental ESA species deals. So the community's been working together hand in hand as best we can for many, many years. To say, as a board of commissioners, we don't have direct decisions in any of this area, but for the water world. So it's really a great history that we have been working on this. There is a big picture. We do know the best choices for water in the long run. And then the big long process getting to this point. Habitat conservation plan is the big deal right now. The fact that it's been signed on to and there's some commitments for water conservation that need to be followed through on to keep us in a good spot for spotted frog and everything else you mentioned. So just pointing out that there is a big picture and many years going into this that gets us to this point.
Thank you, Chair DeBone. I'm going to pass now to Board Member Rob Rastovich.
My name's Rob Rastovich. I'm the steward of a 200-acre ranch at the end of the Arnold Irrigation Canal, and the proprietor of Barley Beef here in Central Oregon. The Rastovich Ranch is the oldest ranch in Deschutes County that is still owned and operated by the original family. This irrigation season marks our 104th year that the Rastovich family has farmed here in Central Oregon. We're the first ranch in Deschutes County to be recognized as a century farm by the state of Oregon. I'm also a board member for Arnold Irrigation District, like my father before me and his father before him. We've been here long enough that the lateral that serves our ranch is named the Rastovich Lateral. Our ranch is located on Rastovich Road. My mother served Deschutes County for 30 years as the treasurer and tax collector. And I was very pleased to see a long employee getting her 25 years recognition today. My youth was spent here in these halls at our county seat with legends like Commissioner Abe Young, like Municipal Judge Penny Penhollow, my cousin, County Clerk Mary Sue Penhollow, even the custodial staff, Jim Mike Michaels, who was here for many, many years, were my mentors. My summers were spent working for the Deschutes County Road Department, repairing, forging many of the roads that members of the Assembly take for granted. I tell you this brief history not to boast, but because history provides insight into the present by showing how current events, institutions, and ideas have evolved over time. It helps us understand the context and factors that have shaped our society and enable us to move forward, make informed decisions about the present. So as such, I'd like to posit a little insight into the present with voices from the past. Irrigation districts were created for the purpose of providing water to farmers. Our canal systems were dug with the blood, sweat of farmers through hard and barren lands. Over time, the land surrounding these canals was developed. Trees were removed, wildlife was displaced, land was cleared, and houses were erected next to our ditches in an effort for residents to escape the stress of urban areas and experience the serenity of Central Oregon. Today, the residents who pillaged those lands surrounding our ditches now seek to curtail the very people who gifted them with their serenity. Those that argue against Arnold Irrigation's modernization claim harm to wildlife, but wildlife drink from still waters, not running streams. They argue against foliage destruction, but the ponderosa pine and the juniper flourish. They argue against historic beauty of the flume, but none have labored to repair it or preserve it. The truth of the matter is that those that oppose Arnold irrigation modernization seek only to preserve the water feature that puts money in their pocket in the form of property valuations, a valuation that was gifted to them free of charge on the backs of my forefathers. If this assembly seeks to preserve property values, then consider the property values of the farmers with no waters to grow their crops. Consider the property values of ranchers with no water for livestock. Homeowners buy houses for investments. Farmers and ranchers seek a quality of life. We seek to continue the community for this year, next year, and yet another 104 years. Every opposer to the Arnold Irrigation Modernization Project seeks to protect the value of property for themselves. Farmers and ranchers are protecting the value for the community and for generations yet to come. A reporter from the Bend Bulletin called me and asked me, what will you do? What will you and the other farmers do if the water runs out? My reply was nothing. There's nothing left for us to do. We gave our water back to the river for the fish and for fun. We gave our water to the spotted frog in Crane Prairie and Wickiup. And when we seek to save water with piping, we are sued by homeowners. We've done all we can do. You won't see any peaceful protests. You won't see any pundits opining about the injustice to the farmer. There will be no celebrity pleas or athletes standing in solidarity with the farmer. We'll do what we've always done. We'll say a prayer, band together, get back to work and figure out how to survive. There is no greater conservationist than the farmer. As stewards of the land, we understand the delicate collaboration between nature and humankind. Today, I speak for every farmer, every rancher, every redneck that doesn't have the time nor skill to speak up for themselves. And I declare in one solitary voice that we will not go quietly into the night, and we will not vanish without a fight. We are going to farm on, because our fight is a fight not just for the survival of generations of farmers and ranchers, but for the breadbasket of our community. My presence here today isn't required. Deschutes County has no legal authority over Arnold Irrigation. Arnold Irrigation has not committed a crime, nor do we need permission. I'm here today to speak on behalf of former County Treasurer Helen Rastovich, County Commissioner Abe Young, Judge Penn Hollow, Rancher Dan Rastovich, Homesteader George Rastovich, for all the families, the Braditiches, the Clovises, the Torkelsons, the Hambys, the Neffs, Larsons, Wards, Butlers, Barretts, Logans, Ferns, Borlands, O'Keefes, Lanes, Boyds, Cashmans, Douglas, Mastersons, Drakes, and Barnums, and every ranch family that forged, built this great place we call Bend. We all live here at the pleasure of their blood, sweat, and tears, and I implore you to respect that from which you hail. I beseech you to recognize the absurdity of pandering to those who have no interest aside from their own self-interest. Do not pander. Lead. Inspire. Bring life to the desert. Not for me, not for my children, and not for my grandchildren, but for generations yet to come. Let us work in the present with an eye on the future, for what we do today will shape tomorrow's ventures. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the information you've provided today, the passion and history you've brought to this story. As you all know, we heard a few weeks ago from people who had concerns about this canal piping project. And, you know, there will be real negative impacts for those people, but it is extremely important for us and for the community to understand the entire picture and to understand what is at stake if this project doesn't move forward. So thank you very much for this presentation today.
So, yeah, just one little bit of follow-up, little relationship building, hopefully. I know that, you know, the canal is a waterway, and the residences that we heard from, it's kind of grown up and, you know, mature trees and not a lot of maintenance activity. And I'm referring to the access road parallel to the irrigation district. So there's not a path, a 2-track where the truck's going up and down along all these lines, because it's just generally been self-maintained, or you've been able to stay maybe in the right of way of where the water is. But bringing the big equipment in to do this job, that's the shocking moment. And, let's set the tone. Let's be positive about, yes, we're going to have to work, referring to your project, working in the canal and having to work next to the canal, which is in people's backyard. So that's what we heard about. That's what I want to just acknowledge. I feel for the folks that, hey, wait a minute, my little shed, my back patio, some people mentioned crossing through their, back rooms or whatever in their property. So, meandering and being a partner in people's backyards is probably the best we can ask for, partnership up front, knowing that you have the right of way for the water and the right of way for maintenance. So I don't know if you want to say anything along those lines, or, this is it. This is going to get real personal for some people.
Right. So a slide that we passed over just in the interest of time was a representation of
We can pull that up again.
the project area we'll refer to. Now, the irrigation district, as Rob was mentioning, over 100 years ago, received federal rights of way as well as from the state. And it is much broader than the footprint that we cover now. Okay.
Forward, probably.
Keep going. It's almost near the end. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a little busy, but was trying to have a relative comparison. So that blue area you see right now with the ditch road to the side is approximately a 45-foot footprint. Okay. The project area for phase 1, as well as moving through the other phases, is going to be between 45 and 50 feet. Okay. So basically with the existing footprint, that is the area for project impact. Okay. As best as possible. Now, what's happened over time, as you mentioned, is the canal moves through curves, and lots of times there are big trees that we've just driven around and left them there. When you have large equipment, particularly 60-foot long trucks that have 40 feet long, 4-foot diameter pipe, eventually it gets to 5 feet, a 60-inch diameter pipe. There is that area that's needed to build the project. Afterwards, though, that impact area is 30 feet. So the ditch road then runs on top of the buried pipe. And basically, I had heard the comments about somehow expanding the easement or driving closer to people's homes or whatever, and that's just not the case. It'll be within the area that we operate now, and the footprint after restoration will actually be 30 feet instead of approximately 45. We just need the 45 now because of the equipment and the trucks and the excavation that's necessary. So we drive by people's homes every day. We'll continue to do that, but after piping, there'll actually be less traffic because of the way that the water is going to be delivered through meters and through valves instead of an open ditch with head gates that need to be adjusted all the time. So very much aware of backyard impact, if you will, but post-construction, it's going to be a smaller footprint and people will actually see us less.
Yeah.
And so even during the construction period, there won't be any spillover out of that 45-foot zone.
No, it's under contract. It's specifically 45 feet. That's the area of maximum disturbance, if you will. And, there will be localized impact with trees that will have to be removed. We've tried to avoid that as much as possible, but after 120 years, there's been actually a lot of tree growth that have resulted because of the seeping from the canal. Anything that's going to be bigger than 2 feet is approximately as old as the canal. If it's less than 2 feet, then it's come after the canal.
Right. Yeah, as I say, so just an acknowledgement, it'll be impactful, and it is the way it is. Any thoughts, Commissioner Dare?
Well, I was given a letter actually by the President of the United States, Teddy Roosevelt, and it was signed when we were still Crook County, in fact, if you can imagine, August 30th of 1906, giving the rights when George Brosterhouse owned all that property down there. Anyhow, looking at this document applicable to some land in your area, I just thought it was to pick up this one sentence. To his heirs and assigns forever, subject to any vested and accrued water rights for mining, agriculture, manufacturing, or other purposes, and rights to ditches and reservoirs used in connection with such water rights. Anyhow, that was a document that I was given, and I just thought, I would mention it today. You were saying that I know that the entire community isn't they're worried about it. When I talk to people that run the irrigation companies, not, let's say, Thompson Irrigation, because we've done all this piping, we're really losing the seepage, and a lot of wells have been impacted in Deschutes County. And really what I want to see happen is I want to see that the farmers in Jefferson County get their funding. They need, what is it, $500 million? What did you say this project was going to be? All the projects are like 200 and some million, but they really need $500 million. We have such serious agriculture in Jefferson County. And if there's some way the federal government is listening, that they could do that funding so that those farmers can continue and not worrying about how much they're going to get, okay, it's great that we're saving water in Deschutes County, but really they need to get their water, and Lake Billy Chinook is so much closer to them with their plant. Yet it's, it's got a huge price tag. I'm just hoping that can happen in the not too distant future, because I know a lot of their land isn't being used at this time.
So I can address that in a couple of ways. Number one is the President Roosevelt's signature is common. We refer to that as a general reservation for easement for the canals and ditches. That's very common on all patents from the U.S. government to the state that went to the settlers. And that's pervasive through our irrigation district as well as the others. Moving towards Jefferson County, the HCP there is 300 CFS that's required in 5 years to be released in the wintertime out of Wickiup. All the water stored in Wickiup is water for North Unit Irrigation District. Okay. So,
but isn't that going up to like 500 then in a couple of years after that?
And it moves to 600.
Oh, to 600.
Yeah. Eventually towards, I want to say it's year 22 in the 30-year HCP agreement. So in 5 years, we have to hit 300. So all of the projects being piped with the conserved water placed in stream during irrigation season, that is flowing to North Unit. This summer, there's been a COID and a Tumalo project and a Lone Pine project where water's now going to be flowing to North Unit that they would not have received prior to the piping project. The Arnold project will also contribute 32.5 CFS towards North Unit farmers during the irrigation season. In return, North Unit guarantees that water, that same equivalent amount of water that's passed to them from these projects in the summertime will get released in the wintertime, because that mitigates the effects, and that's the most impactful flows for the Oregon spotted frog. That big step from 300 CFS to 600 CFS is what the Billy Chinook project is all about for North Unit. So there's this first step to 300. That's what a lot of the projects are oriented for now, including the Arnold project, is to be able to help North Unit meet that threshold. And then you have your second 300 CFS that goes beyond the piping that you've heard about to date. So the Board of Control is totally in support of, federal funding for the North Unit Irrigation District. And we're already working, and we go to DC several times a year to talk with Reclamation and to NRCS with our, elected officials, including Congressman Ben, as well as both senators, Wyden and Merkley. So it's an ongoing effort. We started piping and conserving water 20 years ago, and we'll be doing it for a long time.
So it's really important to understand that if we care about the North Unit Irrigation District and we want to help them supporting projects in Deschutes County that allow them to release water out of Wickiup, but have that water replaced by conservation from other districts, is one of the best things that we can do to help North Unit Irrigation District.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us that was here on this topic. Great to hear from you directly. These are the facts as the community knows them on the topic of water.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks for coming.
So item number 8, service partner annual update. So a little bit more on water up at Deschutes Watershed Council. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, commissioners. For the record, Stephanie Robinson, Administrative Services. Each year, the board awards annual grants to service partner organizations during the video lottery allocation exercise. One of these service partner organizations is Upper Deschutes Watershed Council. Today, we welcome Chris Knight, Executive Director, who's here to present the organization's annual report. There's no further questions. We can get started.
Chris, thank you very much for joining us. We see you annually, and I know there's projects out there that you're working on all year long.
Yeah, thank you for having me, commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to come and update you like I do every June. And I think Stephanie's going to pull up a presentation that I have for today.
There it is.
Yeah, perfect. So I know you've got a lot on your agenda today. I'll take 20 minutes or less to walk through some of these slides to give you an update on the work we've done the past year. So I'll talk about it a little bit more, but this picture shows a project we completed just a few weeks ago, actually at Riverbend Park down along the river. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that, but we're really proud about how that project wrapped up in partnership with the Bend Park and Rec District. I think I'm able to maybe advance slides, but I see that's being done for me perhaps. So just a reminder, I'd like to remind you what a Watershed Council is and why you support us and what we do. A Watershed Council is a community-based, voluntary, non-regulatory group. And so we're working in our communities around the Upper Deschutes Basin. Our program area is essentially from up in the Cascade Lakes, moving north up to Lake Billy Chinook. As a reminder, there's more than 50 watershed councils around the state, and this was a program that was started by the state of Oregon, Governor Kitzhaber and others. So there's watershed councils scattered across our state. We are the Watershed Council in Bend and Central Oregon. There's also a Crooked River Watershed Council that's separate from us. And I just say, we're a 501c3 charitable organization. This map is new this year. We created it for our 25th anniversary, which was last year, and it represents more than 50 habitat restoration projects we've done across the basin over those 25 years. So you can think of it as 2 or more projects per year. Not every year. Some year we do 3 projects like we did last year. Some years we have 1 large project, but the size of the circles represents the number of projects. You can see a lot of our work over our first 25 years was focused in the Metolius and Whitechoose Creek. And a lot of that is around trying to reintroduce salmon and steelhead to those basins. But we do have projects throughout the basin. Next slide, please. And just a reminder, Stephanie mentioned it, but we're a recipient of the Service Partner Grant from Deschutes County. So that's part of the reason I come and present to you every year, but also because Deschutes County was instrumental in starting our Watershed Council here in Central Oregon. 25 years ago in 1996 and 97, the county was the local government entity that helped start the Watershed Council here in Bend. Next slide, please. We've got a board of directors of 13 currently that help guide our Watershed Council. Thankful for their service, including a connection to Deschutes County. Will Groves in your planning department serves on our board. But as another connection to our Watershed Council, when you see all these folks, when our board elects new board members, you send them a letter of appointment because of your connection with our Watershed Council. Next slide. Just a reminder of our mission, we seek to protect and restore the Upper Deschutes watershed through three main purposes: habitat restoration, watershed education, and long-term monitoring. Next slide, please. So now I want to switch gears. That's our background. That's who we are. I want to talk a little bit about the work we've done over the past year. So yeah, that first slide. Well, yeah, go ahead. We can move on ahead. Thank you. First project I'll talk about is Creekside Park in Sisters. This is a collaborative project we did this past August with the city of Sisters. Here, these pictures are showing some before and afters. So on the left, top left is what you're seeing there is there was a sewer line going underneath White Shoes Creek that was, it's in a concrete casing, and the creek had started to erode down around that concrete casing. It was causing erosion on the stream banks. The city had to fence off with orange fencing. They were afraid someone was going to fall off that steep bank. It was going to be a hazard. And not to mention that concrete barrier was an issue for fish and wildlife and just a kind of a safety issue. So what we did, we went in, the picture on the bottom left is the same spot, but we went in and built the creek bed up to cover and protect that sewer line and that concrete casing so it was no longer a hazard. We rehabbed all the stream banks. We put logs in, we planted trees. The other thing we did on the right, those pictures, top right, the people could access at any point along the creek. And so it was just getting loved to death. Banks were eroding, plants weren't growing. So we created, on the bottom right, you can see one access point. That's one of 4 stone stair steps down to the creek that people can now still access and enjoy the creek. It's just in a more sustainable way. Next slide, please. So part of that was separate from those 4 access points, we built cedar split rail fence. And if you're driving through Sisters, you can, if you're going from Bend to Sisters, right as you come into town, you can look off to the left and see Creekside Park. There's now split rail fence. We worked with Heart of Oregon Corps. That's these other pictures. So these are local youth that are being trained in job skills. So they put in the fence for us. They're 18 to 24-year-old young adults. So we're providing opportunities like that through some of our projects. Next slide. And then, then we involve the community. This is the education piece of our Watershed Council. So last fall, after the project was constructed, we brought in, we had over 300, almost 350 students in mostly in the Sisters area, but Redmond and other places, and almost 75 adults that came out and planted 2,600 grasses, shrubs, native trees along this stretch of White Shoes Creek. And so that's the education portion. We're trying to get adults and specifically students out to understand about their water resources, about their rivers, about their streams in Central Oregon. So they develop a stewardship ethic that they want to care for these places over time. And then that second bullet there is just a reminder, the Watershed Council's role. We went out and raised dollars, public and private dollars, through grants to complete this project in partnership with the City of Sisters. Next slide. So very, very similar project as this Riverbend Park project. This started last October and it's carried through May this year. It's about 3/4 of a mile of the river here in Bend, down in the Old Mill District. And same thing, it was being loved to death. People there were about 13, 14 human created access points that were eroding banks, trampled vegetation. So we did the same thing we did at Creekside Park. The idea was to create some really nice access points. You're looking at one of them in this picture now, and then fence off the rest of the area and plant it. And what I really like about this photo, the spot that we created, the access point, there's nice stone steps down to the river where people can get in and out of the river a lot more safely, by the way. This had a lot of old rebar and cabling from the old milling days. So now it's a safer spot for people to get in and out of the river. The other thing we did right in the middle, there's a big concrete structure that we left there as an interpretive piece. That's an old relic of the milling days where they used to drop the logs into the river and float them down to the mills. It's now kind of like, it's a fenced platform that people can stand and look out on the river. And we're gonna have interpretive signs there that I'm really excited about that are going to share the history of this spot on the river. What was this place like 150 years ago before it was settled? What was it like 75 years ago when it was active milling industry? And then what is it today as a tourism site? And it's a place to educate people about how our rivers changed over time. There's also on the left in that picture, you can see we've created some habitat. There's a off-channel wetland, we call it, that will create habitat. And it's a place to explain to people about our native species, about fish and herons and frogs and all that. So again, our role was to raise dollars to do this project. We raised about $650,000 to construct and implement the project from, again, public and private grant sources. Next slide, please. And again, the part of our role is educating the community about why are we doing this work. We had 20 planting and tours events this spring in April and May. And again, we engaged over 600 students and community volunteers, adults, and they planted about 2,500 trees and shrubs and grasses in this new project site. Next slide. I put this slide in. This is another project we worked on last summer. It's I'll be brief on this one, but it's out near Sisters, White Creek. And I just share it because there's a different, sometimes we bring in excavators and dump trucks, and that's how we reshape a river and restore it back to its natural condition. This project, we're trying something different where we've got a contractor that works with youth crews, and they're putting in wood structures by hand. We call them beaver dam analogs. So we're trying to replicate what if beaver were still in this system. There's not near as many beaver that are in this system as there were back in the day. And so what we're trying to do is replicate some of that and put in some of that wood structure that the beaver would have put in, but we're doing it in a way that's not as disturbing, and we're using youth crews to do that. And the piece I wish I would have had a slide about is we've also been working with some funding from Oregon Department of Forestry, where we are thinning trees around the Sisters area, and we're using those trees for these projects. The reason we're thinning those trees is for wildfire risk reduction. And so we worked with the local HOA. We worked with Pole Creek Ranch just on the city boundary of Sisters, did some thinning there. There's a power line project where CEC cleared some trees. We paid to haul those trees off instead of just piling them and burning them. We're putting them back in the river for habitat. Next slide, please. I share this just as an example of a project I've been working on. I've been on a fish passage advisory committee that was formed by the city of Bend and the Bend Park and Rec District. And this committee has been working for a couple of years, and we're just next week meeting with the city council and Bend Park and Rec board. We're going to be recommending a solution for fish passage at the Newport Dam. It's called a nature-like fishway. It's 4 alternatives that were considered, and this has come out. A consensus of the committee has landed on this option. And so I just share it because it's something our Watershed Council has been involved with. The next step is really understanding who could own and operate this fish passage structure, be next to Pacific Power's dam, and then garnering support from neighboring landowners, seeking funding for design. This was a very high level feasibility study. Next slide, please. Lastly, a couple more slides. Just our education work. We've launched something new. Last year, we piloted what we call a watershed speaker series. And this year we put on 2 more of these series. One was about the Metolius watershed, Metolius River. We had about 40 people attend. We did that at Sisters High School out in Sisters. This is a new partnership. This year we're trying with COCC, where COCC is doing this through their continuing education program. They market the programs and then we put them on. We also were just wrapping up a series about the Deschutes River and the upper Deschutes. We've had about 60 people attend that. That's been held up at COCC. And all this work has been funded by the Roundhouse Foundation. That's a local foundation here in Central Oregon that's funding this work. Each of these has been 6 sessions, and the last session is a tour of projects in the watershed. So looking forward to doing more things like this in the year ahead. Next slide, please. Lastly, I just comment on this is just one example of our monitoring work. It kind of connects back to the presentation you just heard about piping the canals. And so we have temperature monitoring locations throughout the watershed where we're monitoring stream temperatures. So that's happening in the Deschutes River and Tumalo Creek, in White Creek, in the middle Deschutes and upper Deschutes, upstream and downstream of Bend. But I'd say in White Creek in particular, what we've seen is the piping in that system, the work they've done in Three Sisters Irrigation District has led to more water in White Creek. It used to go dry every 2 out of 3 summers, and now there's because of the piping in that system, it's allowed the district to keep more water in Whitechoose Creek. 23 CFS is a minimum in the summer now. So contrast a creek going dry with now 23 CFS every summer as at a minimum. And what that's meant is if you keep more water in the creek, your stream temperatures are colder, right? And that's good for fish and wildlife. So it's just another angle to think about the value of piping our canals. Next slide, please. This is just a slide sharing a bit, for your benefit on where our funding comes from. We get a portion from federal and state grants, but we also get a large portion from private contributions and non-governmental grant sources. So I think it's 30% non-governmental grants and 10+% contributions. So almost, close to 50% of our budget is private contributions. And specifically, a lot of that goes to our education and outreach efforts that you heard me talk about. Next slide. And, this connects to the $20,000 grant that we very much appreciate that you give to us through Deschutes County. We leverage that. This last year, our annual budget was around $1.5 million. This next year, we're up over $2 million in our proposed budget. So, we bring a lot of federal, state, and non-governmental grants to the community. And part of that, part of this 20,000 is some of our staff time to write those grants to go get that funding and bring it back to the community. Last slide, I think. Just a reminder of how you can connect with us, how people can connect with us. We've got our annual river cleanup that happens the last weekend in July every year. That's coming up again, July 29th. It'll be at multiple sites around the watershed. You can always follow us on social media or reach out, view our website, or reach out to me. I appreciate your time today. Thank you for listening. I know you've got a lot on your agenda. Happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Just one comment. I would say it's great to see the projects you're doing in Creekside Park and Riverbend Park. I know quite often the Watershed Council is working in really hydrologically and ecologically important spots that are out of the public eye on, national forest sites or on land trust preserves or places like that. So this very important work mitigating the impacts of, heavy urban recreation use and sewer pipes and things like that is it's a great contribution to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chang.
Well, great history here at Deschutes County, even getting it started so many years ago. And that $20,000, as I know, is the kind of little bit of grease to make things flow. So you can even, advocate for your mission to bring in other funds. So I'm glad to be a partner as best we can at this point in time.
Thank you, Commissioner DeBone.
Thank you for being here today and actually in letting this entire room full of people know what you are doing and being so appreciative of the 20,000 that we've granted you the last couple of years. So appreciate hearing. And yes, Creekside and Sisters is quite lovely. And I'm so glad you guys took over and cleaned it up the way it should have been done. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Great. Thank you for the update. Item number 9, extension of a limited duration position for project manager to work with homeless individuals.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Erica Kropp, Deputy County Administrator.
Good morning, Janice Garso, Director of Health Services.
Dan Emerson, Budget and Financial Planning Manager, County.
This item is to extend a limited duration position, a management analyst position in the Health Services Department. The resolution would extend the position through June 30th of 2024. Originally, this position was assigned to the COVID Response and Recovery Program, and the position was set to expire March 31st of 2023. On March 22nd, the board approved extending the position through June of this year with funding from ARPA. The purpose of the extension was to focus on coordinating the work associated with the county's DSL land exchange, working with the Redmond service providers, and to minimize the impact of a camp closure to people who are houseless. If this position is extended, We would likely use a position to help with the Juniper Ridge remediation plan, which will come before the board in 2 weeks, and if the board approves that plan. The position would also broaden. There's a great need to work with people who are houseless in terms of emergencies. If the position is extended, it would be funded by a mix of OHA COVID funds and ARPA funds. And Janice will talk a little bit about if the position is extended, what other projects it would work on.
So this is a position that would report within our emergency preparedness structure. And the job of emergency preparedness is really to respond to any number of emergencies that can occur in the community. Because of this individual's expertise, they would be specifically focused on individuals who are vulnerable because of houselessness or fragile housing situations. So the kinds of emergencies that affect that population are things like wildfire smoke, heat, cold events, and the impacts of being displaced from the places where they've established a living situation. So this is a management analyst. They're hired for their skills in project management, and that's really what they do. They manage all the moving parts of our response to a population of people with specific needs when there are emergencies in the community.
Janice, do we have any more OHA COVID funds then?
Yes.
I noticed we do. I mean, we could allocate more than the 30,000.
No, the 30,000 is what we have remaining in a program element that was unspent. So we, because this position would potentially respond to outbreaks and to the impacts of COVID on our unhoused population, we can justify the use of COVID-related program element dollars to cover a portion of the cost. So that remaining amount is 30,000.
That's all that's left there.
I believe so. I don't have my handy business officer Cheryl here, but that was the amount that was identified that was remaining in that program element. And then we have some additional unspent dollars from a vacancy that we don't intend to refill. That was one of the positions. I'll keep my phone here in case Cheryl's watching because she sometimes texts me the correct information. But that's from an existing vacancy. Those were ARPA funds that had been allocated specifically to health services and are unspent because of the vacancy.
To the vacancy, that's another 30,000.
That's another 30,000. And then the remaining cost of the position, we're requesting to allocate some ARPA funds that are in contingency that were sort of more loosely identified for.
In the health department?
Not in the health department, in your remaining
Are you talking about our 412,000, Dan?
No, not the ARPA balance, the contingency that was widely put in a health service bucket.
The health service bucket.
The one,
There were two of them. Okay.
right.
the 1.3 million is those combined aggregated approximately.
Okay.
Well, one question I have about this position is how is this position guided or directed? I mean, there's so many nodes of homelessness response in our community. And I'm trying to understand where this position fits within that, that network of people providing a whole range of different services and various entities that are instigating or triggering clearing activities.
So our proposal is that we bring this position back in-house. So we had the position under Eric, sort of roughly, because of the coordinated work that Eric has been overseeing or connected to related to the coordinated houselessness response office. I think that office is really getting some scrutiny and some review and is in the process of reorganizing itself. And for that reason, we are proposing bringing this position back in-house, ensuring that it reports directly to Emily Horton, our COVID response and emergency preparedness manager, and has the full access of the leadership structures and the support structures that exist in health services. So they really will become our public health arm of responding to projects that impact unhoused people affected by emergencies.
Yeah. So, so this wouldn't be, What kind of connections would there be with the host team?
Pretty immediate, depending on the project. So they would be a health services employee. As you know, the host team is part of health services. We do a fair amount of in-house coordination when events occur that affect our unhoused population across numerous teams, both in public health and in behavioral health.
Mhm.
So they might have very immediate contact. For example, if the person in this role were managing a project to respond to smoke events, and we were helping people relocate to areas where they were less impacted from smoke, or we were helping them connect with locations they can go where there's filtered air during the daytime, or we were addressing health conditions that were exacerbated by smoke, or we were informing people who are living way out of known communities about how to respond to the smoke event or what to anticipate. They might be involved in that. Same for a heat event. Those often require even more coordination. So this role would coordinate both with our internal teams and with service providers in the community and with county departments that are responding to emergencies like county properties or facilities or CDD or the sheriff's office, any of those departments that may be involved in an emergency response that impacts vulnerable, unhoused people.
Thank you.
Well, I'm very supportive of this position, especially at this point in time. This is post-COVID. We've got action happening. We know that the Juniper Ridge code enforcement case is pushing us to do something. Not a whole lot of common ground there, but we're going to do something. And right now is the time to do something before a heat event, so August is what I'm referring to, or the winter coming on in November. So for the next few months, it's time for action. And, putting this position in is going to be supportive of all those efforts.
Thank you.
So yes.
Is there a person that's filling this position currently?
There is. Marissa Cummings is filling the position currently. I believe she has certainly indicated that she intends to remain in the position. The benefit of that is that she's already done a significant amount of coordination of work focused on supporting homeless people.
Okay, that's what I was hoping you were going to say.
Yes.
Thank you, Marissa.
Yeah, we're very happy to keep her.
And is well practiced at preparing people for clearing activities as well.
Which is not the primary purpose of her job.
Well, there's other reasons we have to take action sometimes.
Yes.
So this is what we're responding to. So,
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So is there a motion?
I move approval of resolution number 2023-037 to extend a 1.0 limited duration health services full-time employee through June 30th of 2024.
Second.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Dare,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and I will vote yes.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Well, we're not doing too bad on schedule, so 20 minutes from the proposed schedule. At this time, item number 10, the camping on publicly owned property. This is a proposal with our partners at the sheriff's office. So we'll get switched here. I think they're outside. Maybe somebody can notify. Thank you. Well, let's just take about a 3-minute break, just standing up, spreading out a little bit. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending today. Commissioner Dare, but she was in the room. I didn't see where you were.
I'm so short, I know.
Okay, so this is item number 10, camping on publicly owned property. Thank you very much for joining us, Sheriff, today. This is a big topic of the day. Just like I mentioned a few moments ago, we have resources. It's generally time for action. It's post-COVID. We haven't seen the heat of July and August yet, and that's coming quick. And what can we get done before the snow flies? So just a little bit thoughts from myself here. Thank you for joining us, Sheriff. Please.
Thank you, Commissioner. For the record, Shane Nelson, Deschutes County Sheriff.
William Bailey, Patrol Captain, Deschutes County Sheriff.
Commissioners, I appreciate you having me come before you. I'm proposing a camping on publicly owned property county ordinance that in a nutshell would allow for enforcement in no camping zones, as well as enforcement of a 2-week stay period, which is similar to what the federal government has on its public lands. This is a work in progress. I've received lots of help from my partner, Dave Doyle, County Counsel, who's helped guide me, as well as several teammates in our sheriff's office. This is a crucial component to the sheriff's office ability to guide individuals to resources while enforcing the rule of law. I'm the executive branch of government. It's my job to enforce the rules, and everybody is accountable to those rules. We are blessed to have excellent women and men who serve alongside me, who use discretion as we go through and enforce those rules and the laws of the state of Oregon. I don't know how many of you have been out to some of the living situations that these individuals are staying in. It's tragic. I've been out there and I've visited with some of those individuals. And when I look at this from the standpoint of a community and a sheriff's office, there always has to be a balance. One thing we have going for us in this area is we do have a tremendous amount of resources, and we have access to a lot of things that can help us better individuals' lives. But at the end of the day, we are all accountable for our own actions. It's always been that way. Some need assistance and resources to help them find their way, but at the end of the day, we're all accountable for our actions. The importance of this ordinance is so that when we go out and we have contacts with individuals that are living in some of these situations, we have the ability to enforce the rule of law and offer resources. The sheriff's office is very good at offering resources because we want to protect the public safety of all the individuals that are in our county. And we also want to protect and enhance the livability for all of the individuals that are in our county. Recent examples of us assisting individuals in these types of living conditions are a gentleman who had a recreational vehicle, was having difficulty finding a part for his generator and batteries for his recreational vehicle. Very nice gentleman named Ken. Moved here from the Midwest, has 2 small children, and he's doing the best he can to make ends meet. Has a part-time job. And the sheriff's office stepped up and purchased batteries and a starter for his generator just to help him continue to move along and better his own life and living condition. I think I will pause there because I'm sure there's questions. I will, before I pause, make a note that there are several individuals in this room who support this camping ordinance, and it's work in progress. I know that we can have some more discussions and adjust some separate points in this ordinance, but the spirit of the ordinance is clear in my mind, and it's necessary. Commission, have any questions, sir?
Well, great. Thank you very much.
I'm wondering if you're going to actually walk us through this document, because it's not super clear for me. You describe a number of different types of public land locations and the kinds of enforcement and action that would happen on them. And they seem to overlap at times and kind of disaggregate at times. So I'm actually not really sure what is being proposed in each different kind of public land location. It seems like there's at least 3 buckets. There's county-owned property, there's federal land within a mile of the urban growth boundary, and then there's other federal land. I mean, is there more slicing?
I can help simplify it for you, Commissioner. And that's why I wanted to provide you all with the document ahead of time so that you could read through it. Very generally speaking, there's only 2 buckets. There's county public land, which you all have a county ordinance that forbids camping on county public land. And I think Mr. Chair has pointed out before that there's possibly another ordinance or standard practice that is in conflict with that county ordinance. But the second bucket is simply any camping on publicly owned property cannot occur within 1 mile of a private property line or the urban growth boundary. So that would be designated a no camping zone. The other piece of that, Commissioner, is the 2-week stay. Individuals who are camping out on public lands, unless it's a designated campground or private facility campground, of course, private property, may stay 2 weeks and then need to move 2.5 miles away from that location.
Okay. The text in this most recent draft, it doesn't say a mile of private property. It only says within 1 mile of an urban growth boundary. And I know there's
Yeah, I'll have to look at it, sir. And like I say, it's a work in progress. If it doesn't say that, that's the intention, and we'll work on it.
Right.
Well,
yeah,
no,
I definitely.
it actually does, Commissioner. In C place, camping's not allowed at any time in any of the following places. In or 1 mile from the boundary of property zoned residential, rural residential, urban unincorporated community, rural service center, resort community, rural commercial on the Deschutes County combining zones map in effect at the time.
Got it. Okay. Sorry.
No, I appreciate
this
it.
draft, I think, last night. So
yeah, I appreciate the question.
Trying to pivot here.
I just wanted to comment one thing that I was actually really happy to see, and something I've lost a lot of sleep about over the last couple of years. It's when we have a fire, and how do we get the people out of China Hat in the middle of the night? How do we get people? And then we've got all the communities around that area. So adding this 1 mile, but number 8 on the last page of your rules under, let's see, what is it under? Under manner. This to me is so important. Vehicles, and I really appreciate your story telling us how you actually help someone get their vehicle running again. They've got small children. Honestly, this is what we want to do. Anyway, it says that the vehicles must be operational, capable of being started and driven under their own power, because I thought, how are we going to get people out of there at 2 a.m? Is it possible if we have the 70-mile-an-hour wind from September 7th of 2020? Remember that horrible wind that day? So I do appreciate this. People, if they need some help, ask for help when you're driving around. I mean, on my last tour on February 2nd, we saw a lot of vehicles around some of the camps in China Hat, and probably a lot of those vehicles weren't operable, but maybe some of them are. We've got to make sure people have a way to move in case, summer's coming and we always have to worry about it. So anyway, I just heard the story of someone I know who was rear-ended in Jefferson County. They're laid up. And I told this gentleman he was in the vehicle with his family, it was a police, whatever, the person hit him and he's laid up. And I said, listen, let us know if you need some help. This is somebody that's been working their whole life. I go, but let us know so that that family doesn't become homeless. I think that's a really huge need in our community. And I just wanted to repeat it to this crowd, how important it is for people to be able to stay in their homes. So thank you for making sure that those vehicles can run. It's probably an easy question. I don't know, Captain Bailey, if that's something that your team can do when they're out and about greeting and meeting with people, but does this vehicle run? And if it doesn't run, what does it need so that it can run?
And I'm going to interject for the captain here 1 second and just let you all know that's what we do. I mean, our philosophy is treat people the way we want our family members to be treated. And so while we're out there enforcing the law, we are also out there assisting folks where we can with the resources that are available to us to help them along the way. There is a tremendous amount of private and public support for individuals who need a helping hand up. So that's what we take advantage of those resources and those folks that want to do it. I would like to move into a different segue since you brought it up. And Mr. Chair.
I'm just thinking, this is a proposed ideas. It's generally on paper right now, but the idea would be the conclusion of this is there support by the board of commissioners to take this to the next step? Because we're not adopting anything today. This is just a proposed package. So just confirming what the outcome of today would even be.
Right. I will, on the heels of what you said, Commissioner, that was the decision point for the 1 mile range, is to allow adequate time for fire evacuation or resources to get to a fire in the event of an emergency. And we have 4 just specific examples. One of them occurred this morning. 2 individuals that are living south of Deschutes Junction on the BLM land there were cited for reckless burning, allegedly burning the coating off of a copper wire. It's a common tactic of individuals who want to turn the wire into scrap money and oftentimes fuels addiction purposes, but it's against the law. More likely than not, the wire does not belong to those individuals. And then I will have the captain share the other, 5 incidents. I'll have him quickly go over the other 4.
Thank you. I want to talk about just briefly, just a couple weeks ago, May 26th at the off China Hat Road, where a camp was butted up to the golf course, and 2 homeless individuals were angry that golf balls were coming up over the net and hitting around their camp, and they attacked 2 juveniles. One of them had a hatchet or a machete in their hand. We did a press release. I'd be happy to share that complete story with you. But that was close proximity to the golf course, and we ended up with a call for service and had to arrest both individuals for attacking the juveniles.
But then to follow up on that, how long were those people held? Because I heard they were out sooner than I would have hoped. I mean, they were juveniles. Wasn't it like a 17 and an 8-year-old that were attacked, that were working at the golf course?
Both juveniles are teenagers, 16 to 18. I don't have an answer on how long they were held.
Right.
But I could get that for you if you'd like.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We all know or remember in August of 2020 with the fire at the north end of Bend, where the motorhome exhaust started a fire. That fire caused evacuations to residential areas in the north end of Bend and caused risk to residential communities and houses along that area. In response to that fire, we have worked with Bend Fire and worked with some of our search and rescue crews and our inmate work crews to go out and to cut down limbs and brush along those residential areas to try to create a buffer and a break should another fire start. So we have time to respond and stop that fire from getting in the residential areas. In April of 22, there was an RV fire on China Hat Road that was within 200 yards of a residence. And then there was also 18 other fire-related calls that the sheriff's office responded to off the China Hat Road within the previous year. In April of 22 as well, there was a truck fire, and you can see a video on social media news of a deputy having to pull a truck on fire away from a camp, away from the ponderosa trees, and away from other camping vehicles to prevent that from spreading on the China Hat Road area until fire could get that fire extinguished. And then in September of 22, there was another fire at 11 p.m. at night. Bend residents in that area were woke up by explosions, which were presumably propane tanks going off for another RV fire that occurred in the trees. Deputies responded to each of these calls to protect life, to make sure the residents in that area begin with evacuations if necessary, warn residences if the fire starts to go towards residences, and then coordinates fire response in so we can get the fire knocked down quickly so it doesn't spread or move into the residential areas.
And the fire this morning that I had shared the example about was not too far from the 2020 fire that took place in Juniper Ridge during August that threatened 3 subdivisions. I could tell you right now, if the Forest Service and BLM had not had air assets, specifically 3 helicopters that could do continuous dumping on that fire from the canal that was close by, we would have lost subdivisions in there. Sadly, 2 subdivisions that are high number of units for affordable housing in this area.
Are we talking about the Four Seasons?
Yes.
Yes, the Four Seasons. Yeah, there's older older people that live there, vulnerable, getting them out is really an issue.
You know, threat to life and safety. Fortunately, it's during the daytime. We had ample amount of time to get information to these folks so that they could leave those areas. But this is a real danger. I look around the community. This is not an okay situation for the folks who are living in the situation. This is not an okay situation for the community members and the neighbors who are living near these situations. And it's not an okay situation for this county. And so I just want to end with this. I will not give up on this. I'm going to continue to push for this camping ordinance and other ordinances that are like it, because I have a duty and an obligation to public safety, and I have a duty and an obligation to livability and compassion in this county.
Great, thank you.
Sheriff, do you have a forecast for us of what kind of legal challenges this proposed ordinance would face?
I do, and that's from good teammates and partners like Dave and Carrie and Daryl. There are potential challenges on the front of Martin v. Boise case, which frankly, in my opinion, has been taken to a level that it was never intended to be brought to. It deals with sleeping versus camping or living. So there might be some potential legal challenges because frankly, this is a litigious society. The way I look at it, people are getting sued for quite a few things, and the whole tort reform ought to take place as soon as possible. But I won't get too far in the weeds about my opinion about that. But the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals sided with Martin in Martin v. Boise, and it never reached a higher court. Sometimes you have to have your day in court so that you get the final decision and you know what the clear path is. There is also a pending case, Grants Pass. I can't remember who the plaintiff is in Grants Pass. Dave probably remembers, but some of these court cases need to make their way through the process. We cannot be risk averse in what we do. Look, I'm in the risk business. I'm in the emergency business. And so we'll prepare for it and we'll be smart about it and we'll use discretion where we need to. But those are the ones initially, Commissioner, that come to mind.
Do you have a sense of from the point where this is introduced for formal adoption? Let's say this gets adopted by the Board of Commissioners. From that moment to the point where this has cleared the courts with a favorable court ruling that allows us to actually use this ordinance, do you have a sense of how many years that might be?
Well, I'd tell you, we'd be able to use the ordinance immediately because nothing prevents it. And we're well aware of case law and Martin v. Boise, as well as the pending court case in Grants Pass. And so as we go and enforce the law, we'll be mindful of those court cases, but it would take us being drawn into court over a case, and those cases aren't decided. And I guess it would be whether the judge issued a stay until it's decided, or we're getting into my partner Dave's territory that I'm not well versed with, but some court cases can take 8 or 10 years.
Right. And, you know, my other significant litigation concern is if this becomes Deschutes County's land use regulation and we need to defend it in court and we lose, do you have a sense of the amount of attorney fees that might be levied against us?
And I would acknowledge that, I mean, this is for us, you know, you're asking the sheriff, this is for us as a society community, but the Board of Commissioners also, if we accept this, you know, you're asking the sheriff to answer the specific question. These are all variables. There's scenarios all around this that could happen.
I mean, I could ask county legal counsel as well, but I think it's extremely important for us to understand what kind of legal challenge we are inviting or would face moving forward with this before we think seriously about moving forward with it.
And I would also encourage you, Commissioner, to think of how much a legal challenge might cost if someone loses their home or a life is lost out in that community.
Yeah, please hold it down. We've had a great day today. Let's hold the applause or the opinions at this point in time. This is a great conversation we're having. So let's hold on to that.
Well, to go to the bigger picture, I think everyone in this room is acutely aware that something needs to be done. The important thing is that we need to do the right thing. We need to do the thing that will actually have results in the long run. We don't, in my opinion, we don't necessarily need to do the thing that's going to mire us in court and cost us millions of dollars in legal fees in the long run, if that is a potential risk. What we need is a comprehensive solution to homelessness, because we know that when you outlaw camping in one place and you clear people from that place without adequate pathways out of homelessness for those people, they will end up unauthorized camping somewhere else. We have done, and we will have done zero to reduce the number of homeless people unauthorized camping in our community. We're just moving them around. And that has tremendous costs associated with it as well. So, from my perspective, we do need to clarify where people can camp, when they can camp, when and where it is authorized and not authorized to camp. But that needs to be done within a comprehensive approach where we are creating alternatives for people. You mentioned that you think that there's a lot of resources. I think that there are some resources. And I think that the resources that are being deployed to respond to homelessness are inadequate to the problem that we have. We know that there are great organizations in our community who are moving people out of homelessness every single day, yet the numbers continue to increase. Some people could look at that and say, well, clearly the stuff that those people are doing, those organizations are doing, isn't working. I would say it's the exact opposite. We can see, we have concrete examples in our community of what works. We're just not doing it at an adequate scale to really turn the dial on the problem. And so we need to define where and when people can camp in the context of an overall comprehensive solution that also genuinely diverts people out of homelessness in order for us to actually make any progress in our community. And the cost of not doing that is that you will continue to have to deploy substantial human resources to respond to the kinds of incidents that you are finding at China Hat Road or the next place where those people get shuffled to.
And I don't disagree with your comment, Commissioner. Here's my problem. I was born and raised here, and I've watched this living situations of folks that are without a home for the last at least 23 years. I've heard the same conversations that you just mentioned, and I don't disagree with it. The only problem is if you don't take one step in any direction, you will get nowhere. And that's why I'm pushing for this ordinance, because it will give us another tool in our tool belt. No, I disagree with you. We don't need to tell folks where they can go. There's some personal accountability in this, and I wouldn't insult those living in those situations by saying they didn't have the thought process to try and determine where to go. We can tell folks where they can't go. There's another 1.5 million acres in this county where folks can go, and there's areas where they can camp in accordance with the rules. So if we delay and we wait until we have a solution to homelessness, we will never get there. We don't have a solution. All we're trying to do is mitigate the effects of homelessness. And we need those folks living in that situation to meet us halfway and take advantage of some of those resources. Because look, I've visited with folks that don't want any of those resources, and I respect that. I've visited with those folks that don't want to have to follow the rules. I respect that, disagree with it because it goes against the very uniform I'm wearing, but I respect that. But I think at the end of the day, those individuals who want to perform criminal activity or don't want to have a rule system to live by should find a place where they can do that. You can't do it in Deschutes County. There's always consequences and rules for every action you have. We have the best of both worlds here. You have tremendous caring individuals that work for the sheriff's office that are ready and willing to give folks a hand up, but we need them to meet us halfway. And we're only, we're not diving into the mental wellness bucket here. We are diving into the addiction bucket, okay? We can help folks get medication-assisted treatment for their addiction. We just need to be met halfway.
I appreciate that there is a slice of the homeless population that does not want to live within society, does not want to follow laws, does not want to be told what to do. It is a slice. It's very unfortunate that the sheriff's office, maybe more than any other, county department, needs to deal the most with that slice of the homeless population. But when there's a guy standing behind me in the grocery store who's kind of shabbily dressed, like tidy but worn clothes, who's been working all day, and is going to buy his groceries and is going to go home and sleep in a car, that is not a person that needs to be that is not a person who needs law enforcement interdiction to fix his life. That is a person who needs more places to live that are within his means. And there are, between the working poor who have no place, who can't afford rent, and the people who don't work, you don't want to follow the law that you have to deal with very frequently. There's a whole continuum of additional people in our community for whom a punitive law enforcement approach is not going to be the solution to moving them out of homelessness.
And that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about punitive action. Oh, hold on, Commissioner. And here's the other thing. I would disagree with you that the individual you describe behind you in the store would not benefit from law enforcement interaction. I would disagree with you because we have had interaction with many individuals like that and have been able to give them a hand up. And look, those folks, I get it. There's a whole lot of components to this problem. Our main issue, no one's ever gotten the information from these folks who are living in the situation. No one's ever collected the data. No one's ever gone out and visited with these folks and asked them, what would you need to move forward? How can we help you? And until we do that, we do it on a case-by-case basis as our patrols allow. But as you can imagine, there is a distrust, a certain amount with law enforcement. But until we find out what those folks living in that situation truly need, how do we know? I've never experienced. I don't know. Well, nobody's found out, Commissioner. Nobody's gone out.
That is absolutely correct. And
but
what we
hold
do
on,
need-
I'm not done with my point, Commissioner. my other point would be, look, I'm not talking about the individual not being able to sleep in his car. I'm talking about they can't sleep in the car a mile away from the urban growth boundary or private property lines or any of those zones. That's what I'm talking about. There are places you just can't stay and you just can't camp. And it doesn't mean there's a lack of compassion when you say that. Look, consequences and tough love and enforcement of the rules is compassion. I do it for a living, nearly 29 years. And I'm going to continue to do it, Commissioner, because you know what? I've met these folks. Everybody in here has family members and friends who are in this type of a situation. Yeah, do they have some accountability for it? You bet. But do some of them have some afflictions that maybe we can get them some resources to help them out with? You bet.
That's right. And the comprehensive data set that you were talking about is something we absolutely need for our region. It was something that I was hoping would come out of the Coordinated Homeless Response Office, but has not occurred yet. I believe it is within the strategic plans that are being developed by that office. Now, let me finish.
Oh, sure.
My question to you would be, do you think that your agency, your sheriff's office, is the appropriate entity to be collecting the data for that data set, managing the database, and then kind of basically dispatching the appropriate resources to respond to the needs of the people in that data set?
Are you asking me?
Because that's a.
Are you?
Yeah, no,
That is.
Are you asking me, Commissioner? We would do that?
I am saying, I guess I'm saying that I do not think that you are adequately resourced to do that. And I actually don't think that law enforcement officers are the appropriate entities
A
to.
little bit. So we're talking about public lands at the perimeter of our communities and, a few other things in here. And I want to just put a perspective. I was talking to a commissioner out of Minnesota on a trip to Washington, D.C., and I was explaining the homeless situation. And I said parks and community land. And I learned that, on the East Coast, there's a line right down the middle of the United States of America, East and West. In the East Coast, in Minnesota specifically, there's no public lands like this. There's a community park in downtown. There's some baseball fields associated with the school districts. There's maybe a few little parks, and then the rest is private property and farms. And when you say we're going to enforce the law, it's all private property except for community parks. We're talking about 79% of the publicly owned land around our cities. It's never been a problem. How many people have bought property at the edge of the town thinking, I can take my ATV out the backyard and just go for 100 miles in any direction in public land? For 100 years, that was the scenario, and it's switched on us. It changed recently. And now we have this, wrap around danger in our community, people making bad choices, addictions, trauma, abuse, neglect, all kinds of reasons. So, as I say, for us today is the concept of, do we want to move forward, justifying that this is a different scenario. It's changed in the last 5 years, and it's different than other places around the country. There's a lot of public land counties, so there's a lot of counties in our same boat, but not the whole United States of America. It's only in the West that this would even happen.
Mr. Chair, I want to respect your time, and so I'm going to politely excuse myself here shortly, but I just, look, I think a lot of us had a lot of hope in the Coordinated Homeless Response Office. That comes down to the individual that occupies that office. You all did the right thing. We found that a change needed to be made. That's no fault to anybody. Let's look forward and move on. I would ask you to just please continue to keep this camping ordinance in mind. Let me know if you need more questions. I'm going to be working with my partner, Dave, some more, and we'll just continue to move forward. But if there's no more questions, I'm going to politely excuse myself.
Could I just say, I just have two quick things I want to say. I just spent 3 days in Vancouver, British Columbia, driving from one side of the city to the other. It is the third most expensive city in the world, according to my son who's getting his MBA. And my husband and I, never saw any homeless. Never. And my son said, oh, Mom, we've got some. And I go, but we kept looking and looking, and we never saw any. In Canada, in British Columbia, our neighbor to the north. That was this weekend. The Wall Street Journal from this weekend's issue says that California has spent $17 billion the last 4 years on homelessness. And they haven't solved the problem, 17 billion. But I'm incredibly happy to say that our pallet home on the east side of Bend has just taken in 5 homeless women to that program. So we are trying to make a difference, but you know what? You look at it and you think, oh my gosh, $17 billion, and it didn't make any kind of dent in California. So it's going to take a lot of work. Do we need to pass this on an emergency basis in order for it to go into effect immediately? I'm just wondering about this, Mannix.
And if I
We are
can,
not having an adoption vote.
No, I know that. I just want to know for the future, is it 3 votes for emergency, or does it, what is legal saying?
Yeah, if you were to adopt an ordinance, this ordinance or something similar to it, typically it's a 90-day adoption. So you would do first and second reading, and then it would take effect in 90 days. If you want to accelerate that to some lesser time, then it would require a unanimous vote of the board.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave Doyle.
Well, so at this point in time, I want to thank you, Sheriff, providing this as a starting point. Obviously, community is very involved, media is in the room, and the discussions all over the place around this. Yeah, we'll take it from here.
Before you leave, Sheriff, I just wanted to say that I am not supportive of us moving forward with this at this time. I do believe that.
No, please, decorum, please.
I will.
This is your public board meeting.
Yeah. I'm not supportive of moving this forward at this time. I do believe that we need a camping ordinance, but it needs to be part of a comprehensive approach, which I am not seeing at this point in time.
So,
and I am concerned about the legal viability of something like this, and the legal challenges, timeframes, and costs that we would potentially face trying to pursue something like this. Thank you.
So, would there be, is there a motion we need, or just consensus at this point to move forward? If we're gonna.
At this point, I would suggest a minutes motion to go ahead and have staff coordinate and get this scheduled for a public hearing.
Yeah, okay.
And
Okay.
behind that, we would be working on the actual draft documents.
and
Yeah, so to put direction to it, I would say that,
I'm
please.
sorry, can I ask you a question? We can still add a few other things, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. So this is a concept, it's an evolving draft, it's there could be parts that are have support and not have support, so it's a moving piece at this point in time. So I'm just saying that's the way I see it. As I say, do we have a motion, or how could we?
So can I move that document number 11-04-06X, which means it could be changed, camping on publicly owned property, to be brought back in a public hearing?
So that would be a proposed code section.
Right.
I think that's what that is. Is that appropriate, Dave?
Do you want something a little more exact?
No, I think it's clear that you're making a motion that this come back in the context of a public hearing. In advance of that, we would have a more updated version of the document, probably paginated and organized with our county code, so that it would read consistent with that. And we'd have that at least a week before, whenever the public hearing was scheduled. The public hearing would obviously, there'd be a staff report. Public would have an opportunity to provide input. I suspect there would be some additional revisions if the board were inclined to go forward with it. Likely be even a second public hearing. I doubt something of this nature could get through in a single public hearing. So if there's 2 of you that want to move forward in that way, then that's essentially what the motion would be today. And then a lot of that detail would come into focus as we get closer to that point in time, and then at and after the public hearing, or hearings plural.
So then I'll acknowledge Commissioner Dare's motion with legal counsel's explanation of what we think we're doing here, and I will second it. Any other discussion? You kind of said your piece. So as I say, this is the confluence of everybody's opinion right now. So I will acknowledge it as that. It's not a pretty process, and we're going to be all engaged and fired up on this. But I do support this as in concept as a starting point. So calling for the vote, Commissioner Dare.
Yes.
Commissioner Chang.
No.
And chair votes yes. Thank you very much, Sheriff. So I kept moving my papers around. I don't know my agenda.
Oh,
So we're going to get to item number 11. We do have more business here.
there we go. They're doing something.
Work with them pretty quick.
Nathaniel, what? Okay, so this is item number 11, first reading of an ordinance for a plan amendment zone change approximately 93 acres east of Bend and north of Highway 20. Nathaniel Miller, and no rush, we'll just wait just one more minute. Okay,
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Nathaniel Miller, Associate Planner with the Planning Division. The item before us today is the first reading for an ordinance approving the plan amendment and zone change for a 93-acre property east of the city of Bend. The file reference is 247-22-000-313-ZC and 314-PA.
all from memory.
The application is to rezone the property from exclusive farm use to multiple use agricultural. The applicant has requested a concurrent change in the comprehensive plan designation from agricultural to rural residential exception area. The first required hearing was held before a hearings officer who issued their recommendation of approval to the board. The board had a public hearing on April 5th, 2023. There was a 14-day open record period following the hearing. And then the board held deliberations on May 10th of 2023. At the conclusion of the deliberations, the board voted unanimously to approve the application. Staff and legal counsel then prepared the materials in front of you today. The ordinance and exhibits were created to best represent everything in the record and the outcome of board deliberations. In your packet is a draft of ordinance 2023-010 with exhibits. These materials have been reviewed by planning staff and legal counsel. Today's meeting is the first reading, and I will come back to the board in 2 weeks on June 21st for the second reading. Now concluding the summary, staff is available for any questions you may have. If there are not any questions, the board may move to approve the ordinance as written. There is a recommended motion in your agenda packet. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Great, thank you very much. So as you say, we've had our public hearings and deliberations on the matter. It's a pretty mature product at this point.
Questions?
I can make a motion, move approval of first reading of ordinance number 2023-010 by title only.
And I'll second it.
Okay, so it's been motioned and second for first reading. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Dare,
Yes.
and Chair votes yes. So at this time, first reading of ordinance number 2023-010, an ordinance amending Deschutes County Code Title 23, the Deschutes County Comprehensive Plan, to change the comprehensive plan map designation for certain property from agriculture to rural residential exception area, amending Deschutes County Code Title 18, the Deschutes County zoning map, to change the zone designation for certain property from exclusive farm use to multiple use agriculture. Second reading,
We will look to schedule that on June 21st.
June 21st. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you for your 5 years, by the way. 5 years and a couple weeks or a month.
And I'm sure it didn't mean anything when everybody left the room, as you said.
And just to follow on the tail end of that vote, I just want to say again, what makes me feel comfortable with moving forward with this application is the awareness that we are working with the city of Bend, with the state, to essentially ensure that this land that is essentially been walked one step of 2 steps to becoming to be included in the urban growth boundary, that there will be mechanisms put in place to ensure that that second step does occur, because for a property like this to get 9 units of rural residential housing, where there could be 1,000 units of municipal, urban housing within the city of Bend, would be a tragedy.
Thank you, Commissioner Chang.
Yeah.
Okay, so other items at this time, it looks like Peter might be ready.
Yes, so Mr. Chairman, yes, we have planning commission appointments, and we also have a draft letter to Governor Kotek regarding requesting rural transitional housing and similar accommodations administrative rules. So
Yeah.
it's your choice on
Yeah,
which.
so come on up, Peter, and we'll go through planning commission interviews.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the commission. Peter Yatowski, Community Development Director. Staff's looking for direction and ideally consideration of an appointment this morning on an at-large vacancy on the Deschutes County Planning Commission on Thursday, June 1st. Each commissioner individually with me interviewed Patrick Trowbridge for approximately 30 minutes. On May 12th, the Board of County Commissioners also interviewed 2 candidates for the at-large position. And then a month earlier in April, the Board of County Commissioners completed a recruitment for a Tumalo area vacancy. And there were 3 members who were finalists that expressed interest in the at-large position. And I can certainly list those names if you're interested. So I'm here to answer any questions or provide any further context if that's helpful. But with the Planning Commission meeting tomorrow evening, and then on June 22nd, it's an opportunity to bring the Planning Commissioner elects into the conversation. Their official terms will start on July 1st for a 4-year term. So staff's available to respond to any questions or comments, but looking for direction.
Well, I know we've been talking about this for 6 or more months, and I just remember a while ago that it was, it seemed so far away that we were talking about the next appointments, and now they're less than 30 days away. So we're getting there. With our interviews and experience, anybody to propose or?
I would support Mark Kelly being selected for this position.
Commissioner Dare.
I was supporting Patrick Trowbridge.
Yeah, so I'm real happy that we've had these folks get engaged. So Mark Kelly, Helen Marsden, and Patrick Trowbridge. Patrick Trowbridge would be a person that I would support. It's interesting. He talked about his experience, for the last 25 years here and Southern Deschutes County. Even, that was a point. It was like, oh, interesting. He had some property transactions, and he's been, living in the area and been involved as a realtor. So I'd support Patrick Trowbridge also.
And I believe he might be up for president of the Bend Downtown Business Group.
That was Commissioner Dare. That was certainly suggested when you and I interviewed him. He is his family owns a property in the downtown area of Bend and is on that board and certainly in a leadership position. So he's very active locally.
So if you can make a motion.
I move Patrick Trowbridge to fill the 4-year appointment for the at-large vacancy for the Planning Commission.
Great. And I'll second it. So any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
No.
And I will vote yes. So we want to thank him for joining the team here. As I say, having those diverse discussions at the Planning Commission, I'd like to, as I say, set the culture of not challenging each other with conflicts. There's, these are legislative matters countywide, long runway, long lead time on each one of these discussions. So, and I'm looking forward to a joint meeting with them too at some point.
Great. And that joint meeting is scheduled in September. I think there's an email from me as we're just managing your schedule and the Planning Commission. So I think that's the first meeting in September, so we're looking forward to that introduction. I will let all the finalists know of this decision personally, so appreciate the coordination with the county commissioners on this process over the course of the last 2 months. Thank you for that direction.
And
Is that
if
September
I could just
7th?
say, I'd just like to say, not voting in support of Patrick Trowbridge doesn't mean that I don't think he will do a good job. I just felt that there were other candidates who were much more familiar with what the planning commission's job is, and would be in a much better position to hit the ground running. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Dare, to your question, that would be September 14th. Would be the joint planning commission board meeting. Hopefully that what did I say?
That's the second Tuesday of the month.
September 14th, unless my calendar is wrong, is September 14th is the first planning commission meeting of the month, which is the second Thursday. What are we? The 28th of September? Maybe
That would be
Well, that's
better for
fine.
me because I got invited to ride.
That's plenty of time to work that out.
I got invited to ride with the University of Oregon
good.
Pendleton Roundup in the parade, in the Westward Ho Parade. So
As
how could I do
look
that?
at Nick and
There you go.
Brenda.
Don't let
I'm
that
sure
go.
I know, that's an opportunity.
Let's see, just give me 1 second. Yes, they are correct. I am incorrect. It is September 28th. I
Okay.
apologize for that.
No, that's okay. I was just kind of worried how I would be in two places. So
That was.
And then, thank you very much. Letter?
Yes, thank you, commissioners. We have been coordinating with our House Representative Emerson Levy on an interpretation of House Bill 2006 adopted in 2021 regarding the potential to allow transitional housing, managed camps, safe parking, et cetera, on rural lands outside of urban growth boundaries, whether it be public or private lands. She coordinated with the Legislative Council very timely. She received a response from Legislative Council that the Legislative Council does not believe state law is clear on whether such uses would be allowed on rural lands outside of urban growth boundaries. She did recommend that we write a new letter to Governor Kotek requesting rural transitional housing and similar accommodations administrative rules. So this would be a direction to the Department of Land Conservation and Development and Land Conservation and Development Commission to develop and adopt administrative rules to allow transitional housing, safe parking, managed camps, similar types of temporary uses on rural lands. And so what we did was we drafted a letter for your consideration today. We circulated it late yesterday afternoon. We received some good comments for clarifications, and I've attempted to include those revisions in here regarding clarifying that it's an irrigation canal on one piece on the page 1 and page 2, clarifying that it's not just limited to public lands, but it would also be privately owned, for example, non-high value exclusive farm use zoned lands in close proximity to urban growth boundaries. We certainly welcome any and all other changes, revisions you have. We want to make sure we get this right. It would be ideal if we could adopt a letter this morning and obtain signatures. I do have a clean copy of this, or Jen Patterson is watching. She can amend it as you see fit. Representative Levy has a meeting with the governor's office this afternoon to discuss this. The Department of Land Conservation and Development, they previously had indicated this as being a potential option, but it wasn't previously supported. So they're also welcoming a letter from Deschutes County. So before you is a draft letter. We welcome your consideration, revisions, or any action that you may wish to take on it. Thank you.
On the second page in the edited area, it talks about privately owned non-high value EFU zone lands. Do we need to include privately owned? I mean, that's kind of limiting before we even take a step into this, knowing that a place for people.
I asked for a clarification that private lands would be considered because this letter emphasizes public property so much throughout. So, I mean, if at the front end of the letter, we made it clear that we were talking about opportunities on public and private lands, then the mention of privately owned in the tail end of the letter wouldn't be necessary. But if throughout the first 4 paragraphs of the letter, it keeps talking about public land, public land, public land, then I actually think it actually is key to emphasize that we do want opportunities on private land as well, because what started all of this, what started the first versions of these letters, was the Gales property opportunity out by the Ward Hanby roundabout.
But I'm seeing it as we're just asking for the opportunity to put safe parking or a managed camp on private property. And one of the scenarios I've always started to advocate for is a possible long-term visitor area, which is a kind of a loosely defined area where somebody can acknowledge that they're, in an area, not a lot of specific supports, but service providers can show up, public safety could have a presence, and rules are going to be followed, like not breaking the law. Yeah, so I'm just saying that could be a public opportunity that either the county or the city, because remember the city owns land north of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's question that this would apply on public lands. The question was, well, are private lands even still part of the mix or not? After all of the references to public lands throughout the first 4 paragraphs. So, like, I'm not saying I'm not suggesting taking public lands off the table. I'm just saying that all of the discussion of public lands made me feel like it was actually necessary for us to explicitly
to advocate for
private lands too.
Yeah.
So if there's a better way of doing that, then
public and private, I guess, just because when I read this, there's that, maybe in context, it's saying, assuming that we're going to have opportunities on public land, and then let's include private. So what about either public land, privately owned, non-high value, EFU zone, close to the proximity?
I mean, that's fine. I just feel like that the letter is getting it's not clear. Like, the way that it's written is not clear.
Well, what's the ask? Yeah, so maybe defining the ask real clear.
Maybe, Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask David, if you have a suggestion on language. I just took a shot at this sentence, but if you have a way to capture the.
Well, Nick, I think it would be in the final paragraph where it says what we're asking for, and you could just, I suspect you could indicate, we're writing to ask the Department of Land Conservation and Development to implement EO 2303 by initiating emergency rules to provide temporary emergency sheltering options outside of UGBs, and maybe just say on both public and private lands. But I think it's going to apply, because what we're really asking for is some latitude with regard to the zoning restrictions, and those don't distinguish between public or private.
I don't have any edit.
That seems like a fine place to work this, and then to also just specify that we're talking about in close proximity to UGBs as well.
And that's the common ground.
I don't think we want to open up. I'm not interested in opening up sites 11 miles outside town.
We've always concluded that. I mean, that's our common ground, is close proximity to urban growth boundary.
So are we okay with it then?
There you go. Make a motion.
I move approval of this letter to the governor's office requesting rural transitional housing and similar accommodations administrative rules with the revisions as described.
I second it.
So confirming revisions is in the last paragraph, public and private.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
And chair votes yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. So what we'll do is I'll have Jen amend this, and after our executive session, we can bring it back for your signature so we can send it to Representative Levy. City of Bend has also requested it, as they're discussing it this evening as well. So thank you very much.
So clarity. So City of Bend discussing it is going to kind of read the same.
I'm not sure what they're going to do. They just asked if we could provide them a copy of your signed.
Okay,
letter.
good.
If you approved a letter today as well.
Yep, got it. Okay.
Said I would share it with them.
Representative Levy also suggested that this letter have support sign-ons from community organizations and community leaders more broadly. And I'm ready after reading this version of the letter to go out and seek some of that, but I just wanted my fellow commissioners to be aware that I'd be doing that.
Yeah, and that's fine. So they would sign on endorsing our letter. Is that what the scenario, or creating their
making
own?
I'm making there's not really a way to
Yep.
sign on to our letter, but
Yep.
to
Well,
make
we endorse their letter.
to make
Yeah.
a complimentary request.
Yep, that's fine. That'll be good. Okay. Any other items, Commissioner Dare?
Oh, I did want to remind that tomorrow we have the Central Oregon Health Council retreat for the day. So if Commissioner Chang, can you go to Sun River for me? I think I'd mentioned it last week or the week before.
What's Sun River? Oh,
The chamber.
Yeah.
It's from 10 to 11 it's been at the fire station.
Yeah, I'm not available to do that.
Oh, not. Okay.
I'm meeting with the BLM and Representative Chavez DeReamer's office. I'm meeting with Representative Chavez DeReamer's office about the BLM properties we're discussing for potential landfill sites.
Right.
Okay, I'll let them know.
I actually don't believe that I heard about this before today.
I have it in my notes, but I'm sorry.
So that was just chamber board meeting.
Right. It's a chamber
Yeah, so
board meeting. It's a
just
monthly
an
meeting.
opportunity to attend if you were able.
Okay.
Okay.
I know you'd said you might be leaving town or something, so. Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
No.
Any other items?
Nope. Well, I'll just mention that the Board of Forestry is there's these couple of days. I'm going to go visit with them this evening after the admin social gathering.
State Parks sent an invitation also. If we saw
Yeah, I saw that.
So they're going to be meeting in Redmond. I haven't looked at the dates. I just saw the email and
It's
passed.
next Tuesday, isn't it?
So that was invitation. Also Monday, we had a board meeting, Commissioner Dare, you were out of town, but at 2:00. So 1:00 was the Central Oregon Workforce Consortium. It was an annual meeting, commissioners from all the counties up and down the center of the state passing the annual budget for East Cascades Works. It's about $8 million going to some of the work source offices and reemployment efforts in the community. So that's why we had a 2:00 meeting on Monday. We forgot to mention it.
Thanks for letting me know now.
Yeah. So, okay. Anything else? Seeing none, we do have executive sessions scheduled for today, a couple of different items. How about we can reconvene upstairs for that? Yeah. We're going to go. Okay. So at this time, regular board meeting is completed and we're going to reconvene upstairs for a couple executive sessions.